Story is the first day of the Derek Chauvin trial, and despite the video played around the world, the question that will be central to what the jury decides: what actually killed George Floyd? Alex Perez has more.
With the world watching, the prosecution in the most closely followed police misconduct trial in a generation today beginning their case, showing jurors the badge of the Minneapolis Police Department, highlighting the values it represents: compassion and the sanctity of life.
Mr. Derek Chauvin betrayed this badge when he used excessive and unreasonable force upon the body of Mr. George Floyd. That he put his knees upon his neck and his back, grinding and crushing him until the very breath, no, ladies and gentlemen, until the very life were squeezed out of him. You will learn what happened in that 9 minutes and 29 seconds. The most important numbers you will hear in this trial are 929.
Prosecutor Jerry Blackwell emphasizing this case is only about the actions of one rogue officer.
One of those things that this case is not about all police or all policing. Police officers have difficult jobs. They have to make split-second decisions. This case is not about split-second decision-making.
Blackwell then preparing jurors for what they would soon see: the video that stunned America, raw, unedited, and played for more than 8 minutes.
You will see that as Mr. Floyd is handcuffed there on the ground, he is verbalizing 27 times, you will hear, in the 4 minutes and 45 seconds, "I can't breathe, please, I can't breathe." You hear him at some point cry out for his mother when he's being squeezed there. You will see that his respiration gets shallower and shallower and finally stops when he speaks his last words, "I can't breathe."
The prosecutor telling jurors to zero in on one key part.
For roughly 53 seconds, he is completely silent and virtually motionless with just sporadic movements. It is the body's automatic reflex when breathing has stopped due to oxygen deprivation.
Then the video.
Please, 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 I can't breathe. Please, man, please, man.
Chauvin's attorney up next, moving ahead without acknowledging the horror of what the jury had just seen.
Common sense tells you that there are always two sides to a story. There is no political or social cause in this courtroom. But the evidence is far greater than 9 minutes and 29 seconds.
Nelson arguing Floyd struggled and was difficult to subdue.
You will see that 3 Minneapolis police officers could not overcome the strength of Mr. Floyd. Mr. Chauvin stands 5'9", 140 pounds. Mr. Floyd is 6'3", weighs 223 pounds.
He told the jury the gathering crowd demanding Chauvin get off of Floyd created a, quote, high-stress situation.
As the crowd grew in size, seemingly so too did their anger. There are cars stopping, people yelling. There is a growing crowd and what officers perceive to be a threat. Derek Chauvin did exactly what he had been trained to do over the course of his 19-year career. The use of force is not attractive, but it is a necessary component of policing.
Chauvin's defense hoping to create reasonable doubt around what exactly killed George Floyd.
The evidence will show that Mr. Floyd died of a cardiac arrhythmia that occurred as a result of hypertension, his coronary disease, the ingestion of methamphetamine and fentanyl, and the adrenaline flowing through his body, all of which acted to further compromise an already compromised heart.
The prosecutor then calling their first witness, 911 dispatcher JENA SCURRY. She watched the scene play out live over a city camera mounted nearby. She testified that at one point she thought her screen had frozen because the officers were on top of Floyd without moving for such a long time.
My instincts were telling me that something's wrong. Something is not right.
She says as she became so concerned, she phoned a supervising sergeant. Prosecutors playing a recording of that call.
You can call me a snitch if you want to. I don't know if they have used force or not. They got something out of the back of the squad, and all of them sat on this man So I don't know if they needed you or not.
The jury then hearing from an eyewitness, Donald Williams, who can be heard on that video begging officers to stop. Williams describing the last moments of George Floyd's life.
And like the fish in the bag, you seen his eyes slowly, pale out and again slowly roll to the back of his eyes. He was going through distress because of the knee, and he vocalized it that I can't breathe, I need to get up, and I'm sorry.
Alex, thank you. And to help us break this down, we bring in ABC News contributor and host of the Law and Crime Network, Brian Buckmire. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, this trial is, of course, just getting underway, but after hearing opening statements from both sides, who do you think seems to have the stronger argument at this point? And what are the key factual questions for the jury?
Well, I think both sides came out swinging pretty strong here. What I found interesting, what I was really focusing on, was when they're talking about cause of death, but also manner of death. I think the defense raised some reasonable doubts, especially when talking about George Floyd's neck. The lack of bruising on his neck, I think, was a strong argument. But when the prosecution came out and spoke about manner of death being homicide and not accident, the ultimate conclusion, I thought that was very powerful as well.
And much of this case hinges on Floyd's cause of death, as you just mentioned. Walk us through what prosecutors need to prove on that point and how the defense could potentially sow reasonable doubt about causation.
Yeah, so cause of death is going to be basically how it happened. We're talking about asphyxiation here by the compression of the body, both in the neck and of the upper torso. And so, as the prosecution already led on, basically his heart stopped. George Floyd's heart stopped. The question is, why? Now, the defense has a pretty strong argument in that it's a cocktail of drugs in George Floyd's system as well as the increased adrenaline, while the prosecution has the video and the 9 minutes and 29 seconds in which Derek Chauvin's knee was on his neck to argue the cause of death.
Defense attorney Eric Nelson said, quote, the evidence is far greater than 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Is that a convincing argument, or do you think that those 9+ minutes tell most of this story?
I don't think it's the most convincing argument. I understand what he's trying to say. We as defense attorneys do it all the time. The evidence is not as narrow as the prosecution is providing. But when asking the question of murder or manslaughter, you're asking specifically at that point in time in which that person's life ceases to continue, did this person cause a murder or manslaughter? And I think that 9 minutes and 29 seconds kind of clearly shows that. It is a hard hurdle for the defense to overcome.
George Floyd's death, of course, reignited the Black Lives Matter movement, but the word race was not mentioned a single time in opening statements. Did that surprise you? And how do you think that race might play into this case, if at all?
Yeah, it's not surprising at all. I think, especially for the prosecution, they want to focus this case on, it's not about what happens outside the court. It's about what happens inside the court. And I think the prosecution believes and is confident in their belief that they can prove this case without having to look at Black Lives Matter protests or other things that happen outside the court.
Brian Buckmire, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.